Bernard Madoff is on the move. He has left his apartment building on his way to federal court. He is expected to plead guilty today to masterminding a huge Ponzi scheme that has left thousands of investors without millions upon millions and billions of dollars. New York's Roger Clark is with us from outside Madoff's home on the Upper East Side. We'll get to him first, and Vivian Lee is standing by where Madoff is headed. Let's go first to Roger for the story from his perspective. Roger, good morning.
Pat, good morning, and as you can imagine, it's quite a scene here on 64th Street. There was a couple of dozen photographers, both television and print photographers, still photographers here, awaiting the vehicle that Bernard Madoff has been seen driving in onto court. It was a Kia SUV. It was actually parked inside a driveway behind a gate adjacent to his building. And then around about 10 to 7, we saw some movement, saw some people getting into the vehicle, and then it drove out. The police gave it an escort through a red light here at the corner of 64th and Lexington, and apparently Bernard Madoff on his way to court. And there he will be facing a judge, of course, and also facing some of the victims of this $64 billion Ponzi scheme, which he will be pleading guilty to. The questions that the victims have, there are many. One, who helped Madoff in the scam? What happened to the money? And of course, the big question is why? There are people who lost everything they had saved for years, not just individual investors, but foundations and charities were nearly wiped out after investing with Bernard Madoff. One of them, the American Israel Cultural Foundation, which supports young artists in Israel. Take a listen.
We had to cut staff. I fired 2 very close friends, staff in Israel that had been dedicated to us for decades in some cases. Many are without jobs. Hundreds and hundreds of artists that were expecting our support got very little in return for what they hoped. And it put us in a position of being in a crisis.
It's raw, it's real, and we just feel like nobody in the government cares.
One thing that any victim that you talk to will tell you is that they would like to see regulations put into place that will help avoid this from happening in the future. That's a story from here on the Upper East Side. I'm Roger Clark. Pat, let's go back to you in the studio.
Outside the courtroom, some of Madoff's victims waited patiently for the chance to see him led away in handcuffs. And our Roger Clark has the story.
Amid the crush of members of the media from around the world, the Friedmans, who say they lost $3 million in Bernard Madoff's Ponzi scam.
He should rot in hell. That, you know, how could he be? He's just an evil person. He's just so evil.
I think I could do more good outside than inside watching Madoff. As I said, I don't want to even look at the man.
It was just part of the sometimes manic atmosphere outside federal court as reporters talked to anyone they could with a connection to the case, including this attorney representing around 100 Madoff victims.
Hundreds of millions, perhaps over $1 billion in losses that we represent.
Also taking advantage of the massive media presence, this couple who wrote a book on the Madoff case.
We're here to see justice to be done to Bernard Madoff. We believe Bernard Madoff is an economic terrorist.
With all the camera crews and reporters, making it down the street was a challenge for people going about their everyday business.
A little annoying, but it's okay. It happens, I guess.
These Swedish tourists took photos and had hoped to see Madoff.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's kind of the walk of shame.
The scene was also hard to ignore for people in the park across the street from court.
But this is a first, but I'm not surprised. With the amount of people affected, this is more or less what I expected.
This is the way it's supposed to be. You know, he should get this type of coverage because he stole everybody money.
And come sentencing day in June, you could expect more of the same. In Manhattan, Roger Clark, New York 1.
Disgraced financier Bernard Madoff goes directly to jail without passing go and stopping for his $200. Sources tell New York 1 Madoff arrived at Metropolitan Correction Center. The judge granted the prosecutor's request that Madoff be sent away immediately following his guilty plea to all 11 counts against him, including fraud, money laundering, and perjury. Prosecutors argued he is too much of a flight risk. Madoff has been under house arrest since December after being charged in what could be the largest financial scheme in history. In the courtroom today, Madoff said he started the Ponzi scheme in the early 90s in response to a recession, but it wound up wiping out thousands of investors. He also tried to distinguish between legitimate and illegitimate sides of his business, presumably to protect members of his family who he says were only involved in legitimate dealings. Madoff faces up to 150 years in prison when sentenced on June 16th. Madoff's victims walked out of court cheering today, saying justice has finally been served. But it was a bittersweet day for many who lost their life savings. In the courtroom today, Madoff told the judge he cannot adequately express how sorry he is, and his victims agree.
I just felt that I was in the presence of evil, and I was relieved when they finally put the cuffs on the guy. That was the moment that justice ruled. I don't think when he spoke and he apologized, it was a pro forma apology. I think the only thing he's sorry about is that he got caught, and we're not sorry he got caught.
Every day is a struggle to survive. Many of them can't pay the rent, they can't pay their mortgages, they can't buy food. I mean, it's just horrible. It's just horrible what this man has done.
Victims lined up this morning to make sure they had seats in the courtroom. A few spoke after the guilty plea was heard, urging the judge to go to trial so it would be easier for officials to find out who else was involved in the scheme and where all the money went. Attorneys representing the victims say it could be years before they get their money back. If you would like to see the complete statement Bernard Madoff made to the court, you can log on to our website at